I am Brandon Clark. This is my co-host Swall Hall, and today we're meeting on uncommon ground. So we have quite the episode this week. We have the weaponization of government, something Trump warned us against, but is now doing. Question mark. We'll discuss if he is or not. Then we'll get into crime. We're just going to discuss largely what we think is the best ways to address it. Swall is the conservative, me is the progressive lefty. We'll see where we agree and disagree on that. It should be pretty interesting. And then we have a list of woke words from Third Way. This is a company that works with Democratic campaigns, and they've released woke words that Democrats should avoid. So we'll get into what some of those words are and if this is something Democrats should listen to, woke, all of that. And then we have another new segment at the end. We told you we'll be trying new things these coming weeks. This one's claim for claim. We'll get more into it when we get there, but there's going to be some hot takes, some claims made, defended, argued. We'll see when we get there. To start with, we have Trump weaponizing the government. I want to start specifically with John Bolton, right? That is the most recent one. The FBI raided John Bolton's house in search of possible documents. What's notable about this is that he is a longtime rival of Trump. They originally were associates of sorts. He was like his national security advisor, I believe. Trump posted right after the raid. He was like, John Bolton's a lowlife or like a scumbag or something like that. He posted it on True Social. It also follows some back and forth publicly between the two. John Bolton's a rather public critic of Trump. So it kind of calls into question, like, not even, I guess, kind of if Trump orchestrated this, but not even that. To what extent is it like proper for the president to essentially publicly brag about something like this happening to a political rival of his? So I'm curious, though, what you've heard, what your thoughts are on it, and then we could dive in more.
Yeah, so this is like a lot of our topics where I'm basically going to say, if true, okay, good, that we should probably, follow up on security breaches, anything like that. Cool. Don't I think feel like everybody agrees. The question is it true or is it, like you said, politically motivated? Of course, Vance is standing by it. He's defending the investigation as its integrity. He's saying it was legit. I do know that Bolton has gotten pushed back a little bit on both sides of the aisle, so it's not a complete like conservative thing. But obviously, they did this investigation, started it in his first term. Biden paused it, and now they're bringing it back. And so it's not like it came out of left field or anything like that. He was already, like you said, at odds with this dude. But yeah, I mean, obviously, like I said, laws need to be upheld when it comes to classified documents. I don't think anybody disagrees. But the funny thing is, Trump's not really the guy to be talking about classified documents, and because it wasn't too long ago we were raiding his house for this, and so it's a little bit hypocritical for him to be going after somebody for the same thing he freaking did himself. So,
And
I mean,
obviously
yeah.
MAGA will say, oh, he's the president. He had the right.
Right. He was allowed to. He was allowed to. Didn't you know? Was what did they say? Obama had some, or was it Biden? I don't remember.
Biden,
They were
Obama,
like,
everyone
yeah,
had them. Yeah.
yeah, we all had documents.
Yeah. I have them in my garage.
So yeah, I mean, I want everything done above board and visibly, and so yeah, if there's any ulterior motives here, like it kind of smells like there might be, then I don't support that
So what
at all.
about timing wise? There's obviously the list of Democrats Trump has either
Yeah.
had investigated, right? There's ones that he's pointed. He said there's a speech where he was like, Pam Bondi, I hope you do something about these people. And he mentions like Hillary Clinton, Adam Schiff, all of that. There's obviously the National Guard that went to LA, went to DC. He's talking about sending them to Chicago. Surprisingly, only blue cities. So what do you think about the timing of it all? Do you think it kind of speaks to a larger kind of, I would say, fascistic, or authoritarian type of him wanting to crush dissent or do you think he's weaponizing the government essentially?
I mean, I don't think it's any sort of mastermind plan. Like he's aiming to just, I'm going to take out all the blues. I tend to think that Trump's not all that intelligent. And so I tend to think it's more pettiness and him just not liking people who don't agree, don't do what he says, have opposing views, raise a stink. And anybody who's on his shit list, he's going to go after in any way that he can. So I don't know that it's some big fascistic move. It obviously has some alignment with some fascistic tendencies, but with Trump, it's always how much of that is on purpose and how much of that is because he's just a man child,
You gotta
you
you
know?
gotta love that that's where we're at with the president of our country. Like, is
Right.
it just because he's dumb? It's literally might be.
Yeah, yeah. It's hard, and it's hard to say because on one hand, it can be in some way more attractive is not quite the word, but conspiracy sells. It's a little bit more sexier that he's some evil mastermind rather than just an idiot. But I mean, I tend to ascribe stupidity rather than malice for most people. So time will tell, I guess, on this
What do
one.
you and I'm not curious where you stood about when Trump was saying the government was weaponized against him, that Democrats were targeting conservatives. I don't know if you were in the camp that
Yeah.
you ever saw
No.
veracity in that. Um, I'm curious if you think this kind of puts that to rest, though, now seeing the comparison of what the DOJ looked like under Biden, where, yeah, Trump was prosecuted, but it was like nothing like what we're seeing under Trump with like multiple people being attacked and like almost systematically lined up for investigation. Do you think it kind of puts that to bed that government was weaponized under Biden?
Well, yeah, like I know correct me if I'm wrong, but he wasn't prosecuted for January. Well, now I'm gonna
No,
mess up the date.
no, he
Ninth?
wasn't prosecuted for
Was it
January
ninth?
6th. No, January
Six,
6th.
six. Okay.
Yeah, and he also wasn't
But
prosecuted federally, but he
yeah,
did get
but
the
I
state.
know that obviously that was they did investigate all of that and stuff, and I know he was prosecuted for some actual crimes, moving funds around, if I remember, paying
Yeah,
off a porn star, all this stuff. But um, the thing is, like with Trump, he's very publicly done things that deserve investigation.
yeah,
And so it's kind of hard to take them seriously of like they're out to get me in the Biden administration when like you did things in my opinion that like January 6th needed to be investigated. That was insane. That was insanity.
yep.
And anybody on both sides of the aisle should agree with that. But and then like the campaign things, he did pay the porn, like he did the crime. So it's like yeah, it does. I don't think that we can say that Biden's administration was like targeting Trump. Like, I just don't really see that as much.
Do you think this, specifically this, and I guess you don't have to see it in a vacuum. You could see it with, lined up with other things. And I don't mean specifically the John Bolton, but the targeting of
Right.
seemingly political opposition. Do you think that there's a level of this that would warrant either investigation into Trump or possible impeachment for it? Or do you think this is something that unfortunately it kind of comes with the fact that he won the election?
Well, I think a lot of it will depend on what I know you said not specifically John Bolton, but let's stick with this one for the moment. If nothing is found as far as their raid and their investigation into him, then that could be telling. But right now we're still waiting to kind of hear what's come of all of this. Um, and I believe most of the other people you listed, he just kind of talked about going after them. He didn't actually go after them yet. And so I don't think you can really impeach a dude for shit talking at that point. Um,
There's
but
been a
if he
couple
decides,
people. I know he opened
go
an
ahead.
investigation into Letitia James, the prosecutor, but most of them, yeah, he's only talked about.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, if he continues to start actually going after all these people, and it's like every week we're a new name, a new raid or something, like yeah, then we should probably investigate that. But right now it seems like trumping.
He's like, every Saturday we have a new
Yeah,
Democrat's head
yeah.
on the stake.
10 a.m. Tune in.
Yeah, that's funny. All right, well, yeah.
Pulls
If you,
names out of a hat. He's just like going after.
what state are we doing
Oh, we're
today?
going after Fauci. We're going after
Is it
Cuomo. Like,
is it bad that there's an above 0% chance that that happens? There's a non-zero chance. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
it's not
yeah.
zero. It might not be like more than
More than
one.
one,
Yeah,
yeah,
but
but
it's
it's
not
there.
zero. Yeah, and I would say it was zero under every other
And,
president.
and if it doesn't happen there, you can count on it in South Park or something.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. So moving on to crime. This has kind of just been back in the conversation, I think, obviously, with the National Guard walking the streets and Trump in the right saying, like harsh punishment and policing deters crime. The left obviously is more like rehabilitative measures deter crime. It's a discussion. So, and I don't know if me and Swall, we've never really talked about crime in an extended
Mm-mm.
manner. So I thought it would make for a good conversation here because I think the best conversations are when we don't know if we'll agree or where we agree or not. So let's start with, I guess, your opinion. Because I honestly, you're more of a surprising figure. I feel like people could probably guess
Yeah,
what
I
my
could go either way. Yeah, I think I'll surprise some people on this. I am a Catholic, and if people know anything about Catholicism, they've probably heard of Saint Paul. He's a very, very famous Catholic or Christian. He used to be Saul, and when he was Saul, he went around persecuting, reporting, snitching on, potentially murdering Christians. And then he converted and became one of the goats. And so I believe in second chances. So I am more of the rehabilitation mindset, always have been. It's never made sense to me. I'm also against the death penalty. I know that's kind of an aside, but very against the death penalty. I think every single person who claims to be pro life needs to be against the death penalty. And shout out to the church for saying that the death penalty is inadmissible. And I fully agree. And Francis said there can be no backing away from that position. Um, so that all being said, um, we do need laws. We do need some punishments. Like I'm not saying there's no carrot stick dynamic to this, but the goal should be rehabilitation and retribution that is equal to the crime, not greater. We're not going for revenge. We're going for right is making right what is right, you know,
Mhm.
and then trying to rehabilitate them to get them back into society. And even if you're like more on the conservative capitalist mindset, hey man, that's another employee, dog. Like that's another guy out here. What was the stuff that RFK was saying with you remember when he was like,
The autistic kids will
yeah,
never
yeah. Well,
work. I
that's
already
they'll
knew. Yeah,
never vote. They'll never
yeah.
they'll
Oh
never
my
work a
god, dude.
job. They'll
Yeah.
you will never pay taxes. This type of thing, you know. So that's how I feel about crime. So when it comes to deterring it, um, that's a harder question because I think violence and like just overall, I guess, harshness isn't necessarily going to do it. That's why I'm not pro death penalty because people who are criminals want to commit crimes. Like they're gonna do it if they're gonna do it. They already don't care about the laws. So it's not like they're like, oh, I was gonna do it until they said that, you know, it was illegal or there was this punishment. I'm like, they're still gonna do it. So I'm not sure what the best approach is, but I do err on the rehabilitate them as far as when they're actually in the jail.
Mhm. Yeah, so then we definitely disagree. I think that no, I'm kidding.
Oh
I
shit.
no, we I'm kidding. Yeah, no, we agree on pretty much all of that. I also am against the death penalty. I think that rehabilitation should be the goal for a couple reasons. I think morally, as you said, there's a strong argument for second chances, for like anyone can change. There's even like you said also there's the economic reason. One, if they're in prison, it's going to cost us money. If
Oh,
they could possibly be out of prison, they could benefit us as a consumer, as an employer, as an employee, whatever it may be. I also think that like when it comes to talking about crime, the goal should be deterring crime, right? And when we just look at what works with crime, rehabilitative measures typically work better than like harsh punishment measures. And if you just think about it logically with most crimes, that makes sense. If somebody's poor and they steal because they're poor, no matter how hard you punish them, if they're still poor, they're still just as likely to
right.
steal, right? If somebody is start or if they're addicted, I guess is even a better one to drugs, and they're doing whatever to feed that addiction, no matter how hard you punish them, if they're still addicted, they're still just as likely to do that. So I think rehabilitation is clearly the goal. I'm curious then, what do you think is the biggest driver of crime? I think we would probably agree mental health is a big one. I guess so aside from that one, given that we agree there, what do you think are like some of the biggest drivers of crime?
I would say poverty for sure is major. And I should have mentioned that. I don't know why I didn't mention that with my deterrence. I think that there are a lot of economic policies that we can do to deter crime. Like, you know, maybe making sure that people could, I don't know, maybe eat and have roofs over their heads.
Yep.
Maybe, you know, get medical care when they need it. Maybe not cripple them with medical debt. Maybe let them, I don't know, get an education without crippling debt. Stuff like that. Just minor things,
He's cooking
just
chat.
minor
Yeah.
things, you know.
Yeah, you know.
But sorry, I went on such a tangent.
Yeah,
What was the original
drive
question?
what drives crime? You were
Oh,
talking
what
about
drive?
poverty, yeah.
Or yeah, yeah. So I would say poverty is huge because um, even if it's not direct. So let's say I'm in a low income area, and you know maybe I have single parent and they're working all day and I'm at home or at school. That's pretty much it if I'm a kid. You get into the wrong crowd, you find out about drugs, you find out that you can sell drugs, you can make money selling those drugs. It's a lot easier. The margins are way better than 90% of jobs. I mean, this is kind of a different thing, but it's sort of like, OnlyFans and stuff. People are like surprised that people do that when they can make thousands of dollars
Hmm.
versus just making $10 at like McDonald's flipping burgers or something. So it's like, yeah, if people don't have money or not even just basic needs, if they have their basic needs but they don't feel like they can get ahead, then they're going to look for desperate situations. Now that's a specific type of crime, obviously. Typically, that it can lead to like murder and stuff, but it's typically more like robbery, stealing, selling drugs, stuff like that. But if we're talking about like murders and stuff, I mean gangs. If you're in a gang, that can be part of it. Maybe same thing. You're in a low income area, so your parents are working, and there's so much that you're neglected, and so then you feel alone. So then you fall into a gang. Like there's so many ways that you can tie it to economics that
Yeah.
I think that would do a lot to alleviate crime. So
I agree with you. I think outside of like mental health, addiction, obviously, like we're
right,
obviously those are pretty obvious ones. I think income inequality, I think poverty is a big one, but I would say income inequality more accurately describes it because I always say when I speak about it, it's the blend of desperation and opportunity. Because if you think about it, right, like how you can qualify the desperation is like in a neighborhood of rich people, there's going to be a lot less theft because they don't really need to steal things. All of them could just buy whatever they want. In a neighborhood full of poor people, that's the desperation side, right? In the
right.
neighborhood full of poor people, there's not going to be as much theft because there's not as many things to steal, right? If nobody has many belongings, there's not going to be as many belongings to steal, so there will be less theft. That's why like opportunity plays a part. So it's when you mix like poverty with those who are well off that you get desperation and the opportunity for crime that like gives you that perfect blend, which is why I agree with you. I think that the first step is like social programs, community interventions, kind of like addressing these things. So like people in extreme poverty are living next to like these billion-dollar corporations that have like the food that they're struggling to find on a daily basis because obviously then they're going to be more motivated to steal from there, and that leads to who knows, there's a security guard and then they get shot and then there's a death and a murder and all of that, and it just spirals.
Yeah, and I mostly agree with that. I would say you're probably right. I don't have obviously the stats. You're probably right that um, if it's a bunch of rich people, obviously not as much crime versus rich and poor, probably more crime. But I still think that poor and poor is still going to have more crime than rich and rich because I still think
I
that
agree with you. Yeah.
even if there's not as much stuff to steal.
Mhm.
I mean, again, they're desperate. They don't care. They'll steal $5 or
I
fifty
would think it would
dollars.
be, yeah, I would think it would be like,
Um,
like bottom up, like
yeah,
rich and rich, poor and poor, poor and rich.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, then we 1,000% agree. But yeah, I would say those are the main contributors. Obviously, there's one category that doesn't get a lot of focus, and it's part of why people believe in stuff like the death penalty. Is some people are just freaking dickheads, dude. Like, it's not because they're poor; it's because they're
Mhm.
bored, or as what's the Alfred line? Some men just want to watch the world burn, or whatever. Like, there are just, and I'm not saying like they're fundamentally evil. Like, perhaps something happened in their lives, whatever. I'm just saying it's not as simple as like give them money. Like, some people they require a lot of mental, like there's a lot that would have to be
I
done.
agree. I agree. I would just have to say I think that's a very
Very minimal. I agree
yeah,
too,
yeah. And
but
and
that
I
is a
think
thing.
I think a lot of those you could even probably trace back to other downstream things that just aren't being traced.
Sure.
Like you said, something happened in their life, or like their mom or their dad died when they were young, and so
Right.
they're like taking it out on others. And so like there's a lot of things that don't get caught. I guess before we let's end on this, because I just want to see, I think it'll be interesting to see if we
Mm.
agree. Let's say we both have to pick one thing to address this. We can only pick one policy. What's the policy you're picking?
Um, it's a coin toss between two things in my head right now.
What are the two? Because
Uh,
I'm kind of having a coin toss too.
uh, universal unelective healthcare
Hmm.
and universal basic income.
Okay. That's neither of those two are the ones I was thinking.
Oh,
I was
really?
thinking like a housing first type policy, like universal housing, or like a WIC for all, like we discussed, where like your basic food necessities are paid for.
Sure,
I would think
sure.
one of those two. I would go probably, if I had to think about it, probably food. I would think there's probably temporary things for shelter and stuff like that. And people probably go to sleep without food more than some sort of shelter, even if it's really bad, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. The reason I always go to UBI is because it seems to be the most flexible option, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
There might be somebody who's having trouble paying their rent, but there might also be somebody who's having trouble eating, and that would solve both of those issues in one foul swoop if they're
Mhm.
getting $1,000 check every month, on top of whatever shitty 725, 1025 job. It's not enough to, they're not going to become Bill Gates, but it's, well, I mean, they could, but I just mean not
Yeah.
overnight.
Yeah.
Um, but it's going to make a sizable difference. That, like, I know there's still places where we live, not like specifically where we live, but in our state where
Mhm.
you can still rent for $900. I mean, it's not a great place to live, and so even that, okay, rent's covered. Everything else is for food, gas,
Yeah.
clothing, water. So I always go to UBI. And then the health thing is, a lot of people, maybe they're in an okay situation, and that one health emergency just, I mean,
Yeah,
even
those are
if it's
strong
giving
ones,
birth or
definitely. Yeah.
something.
Those are strong ones. It's all
Yeah,
policies I support. I've always been kind of on the principle that I think if we had all of the other policies I support, we probably wouldn't need a UBI. But like, I'm also not like against it in theory either. So
sure.
yeah. But yeah, no, do you have anything else on crime that you wanted to point out before we jumped over?
Oop. Thing
All right,
good.
so we have woke words getting banned by Third Way. For context, for those who are maybe unaware, Third Way works on Democratic campaigns. I believe they worked with the Clintons. I know they've like had tremendous success electorally, so they're an organization that knows what they're doing in terms of winning elections. And they've released a list of woke words for Democrats to avoid. Obviously, the wokeness was a big thing in this election, and the messaging and all of this you heard. Highlights of the list, Swall, you might have your own highlights. The ones that I kind of pulled here, like privilege, othering, microaggressing, postmodern, stakeholders, cisgender, dead
Mhm.
naming, patriarchy, BIPOC, and more. Swall might have some of his as well. I am curious. I'll let you. This is another one I'm interested to get your take on, and then we'll jump into discussing a little
Yeah,
bit.
we've got holding space, triggering, cisgender, LGBTQIA plus, birthing person. Those are some classics. Yeah, I think, um, I obviously agree with a lot of these. I think a lot of them are silly. I think some of them are legitimate, but I think some of them are either overused, used incorrectly, or just stupid. Some,
Mhm.
like, um, for instance, like I find birthing person to be absolutely ridiculous, because I feel like we can just use the labels that we have for that. If you really need to describe that it was not a biological female, then we have the word trans woman. You can just say a trans woman or whatever. Like, we don't need to, and it's just, you know, it can be triggery to the other side, and it makes it hard to
I think it's kind
sell
of, and
Republicans and
I think
conservatives.
I would agree. And I mean, I guess my take is I kind of agree with the sentiment of what you said there. I think a lot of it's kind of overused. I think we probably disagree to the veracity. But as for that one, I think it's more for cases like Swire syndrome, where like somebody with XY chromosomes has successfully carried a pregnancy. And I don't think that, to my knowledge, they didn't consider themselves trans or anything. It was just like a man, XY chromosomes, who carried a successful pregnancy to birth. It's like a syndrome in which this happens.
Yeah. My guess would be the majority of Democrats, liberals, whatever, are probably just talking about just women. Any, I think they're trying to just describe anyone who can give birth. But yeah, I mean, it's a fun list. I don't have much to say as far as like its significance in culture or whatever. I don't think anybody's going to stop using these things, but I do think it's a fun list. I'm curious what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, I think that overusing a lot of the language on it, it's like a lot of it is, what's the word? It's like like a purity test almost. People are just signaling, they're
Yeah.
virtue signaling. That's what I'm thinking of when they use a
Hmm.
lot of the language on there. It can be overused for sure. I think a lot of it has a place. Like I'm fine with cisgender. Obviously, I'm fine with LGBTQIA plus. I'm fine with things like microaggressing. I don't think there's any problem with things like that. I do think like people could get annoying with something like othering or like you could people overuse privilege. I think there's
Yeah.
also understanding the semantic loss on some words. Like I for one agree with white privilege and sentiment in terms of like what it is, but I think that when you say white privilege you lose a lot of people who are like maybe lower income white people who are like I'm not privileged and it's just like becomes an impossible battle.
Right, right.
And I think there's something to be said about understanding that and with a lot of these terms. But I just think it's like for me, I think it's pointless. Like I just don't know. Like if Democrats don't change anything except for this, like they don't say any of these words, their election success or failure isn't going to change. I don't think that's going to affect their election results at all. I think there's something to be said about messaging, but I don't think it's like, oh, well, you said cis. Like for one, like Kamala Harris didn't say like any of this stuff, right? Like so, it's like what, like who is it even really for? Like who on the Democratic side, like trying to get elected, talks like this? So it just seems kind of pointless to me almost.
Yeah, I would say if we're talking politicians, 1,000% agree. I don't think they really use maybe like triggered, or maybe I could see like there's that one Ariana Grande clip and Cynthia Erivo about holding space. Like I could see maybe like famous Democratic people, Democrats, not necessarily politicians, using it terms like that. But I think it's more the day to day, and on that level, I actually do think it would have an impact. I think as far as like there's that old thing about if you go down south to some of these rural communities, they're all communists. They'll you go to the local bar and it's uh some lady decided all drinks go to help Farmer Dave who broke his ankle or whatever, and so everybody comes down to put in money to, and it's like they have this it's all of us or none of us mentality. Let's take care of each other, and so messaging I think is huge. I think the left and the right agree on a lot of things. It's the reason I say universal unelective healthcare, to be clear that we're not talking about boob jobs, we're not talking about nose jobs, we're not talking about uh, if you have that thing where your chest is a little sunken and then you're getting buffed out. We're talking about cancer, we're talking about AIDS, we're talking about gonorrhea. We're talking about actual sicknesses and diseases that you need medical care for. So I think being clear about what you actually mean could do a lot to sway people on like an individual level, and that might get your people more votes. But I agree that the politicians themselves, they're not saying most of this stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
systems,
see,
maybe systems of oppression. I'm just looking
yeah,
at a few of them
I
here, but
agree on a cultural level. I think that language should be as inclusive as possible. I always agree with language evolving to be as inclusive as it can, but it also has to be normal. I think that's like a big thing is like if it feels like you're trying really, really hard to like be this kind of person, it's going to be offsetting to like those in like the Midwest, right? And like in kind of like our area and stuff. Like it's just a lot of people you're going to rub wrong instantly by just talking like that. And I do think there's something to be said about understanding that. But some of them, it's like, it's a weird list because with a lot of it, I really agree. But then with some of it, it's like LGBTQIA plus. It's like, why is that on there? Like, I don't get it. I wouldn't group that with things like
right, because
postmodern or I don't know. Like,
well, yeah, because like I've heard that, sorry, excuse me, people are saying like they shouldn't sound like it's elitist college seminar type of language, which would be stuff like holding space or Overton window, like these more, you gotta need to know what they mean. But then
which I
like
get
something
that.
like
I agree with
LGBT
that.
is just like a group,
Yeah,
if you can even call it a group. It's just like an identifier. So
that's what I'm
those
saying.
are different. Yeah, like you said, those are different. It's like, but I guess it just said words. It didn't
They're
say a
like, forget
specific
this
kind of word.
rhetoric and
Yeah.
also F this group. Like drop
Right.
these people. Like it's like, what are
Right.
we doing? Like, what is this? Like, yeah, I didn't get that. But other than that, I kind of somewhat agree. I do think it's funny that like to me, this seems like so much more of a like people on the right make this a bigger issue than people on the left. I think it's like I do think people on the left, this is mostly like internet speak, right? So it's like people on the left on the internet who are like what I call terminally online talk like this. And then people on the right who are terminally online get upset that they talk like this. And it's funny to me that they're like simultaneously like party of free speech warrior people. And then they're like, they're also the liberals or snowflakes people. And then they're getting mad that you're saying you're otherizing them or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I do see it more of a thing on the right, and I mean, the majority of the right are more rural people. They're not necessarily, um, they're not typically in the big cities as much, and so I could see them just being off put by people who don't just sound like down to earth everyday people. So again, I kind of understand on the elitist side of things. An example that just popped into my head was like Black Lives Matter. I remember when the phrasing first came around, me being black, I was sort of on the, yeah, what about, okay, of course they do, duh, it goes without saying, like, yeah, Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. And it wasn't until, funny enough, I heard a white rapper song, Macklemore, who has a song called White Privilege 2, where he talks about, there's like a, what do you call it, where they clip out audio from like a video and put it in the song or whatever. And
Yeah.
it's a guy talking about a fire department going into a neighborhood and one of the houses on fire. They protect all the houses. They care about all the houses. They're fire guys. That's their job. But that one's actually on fire. And when it was explained to me like that, next thing you know, summer of 2020, I'm at one of the protests. Now I don't agree with the freaking organization, but the actual cause of like, hey, probably stop killing us, I support. And so explaining it more clearly and phrasing and language is incredibly important. And maybe it is just a right wing thing, but still, if you're on the left and you actually care about these things, then you want us to come to your side. And so you should care.
I
And
agree. Yeah. I agree.
so,
I
yeah, I
agree
think it's
completely. And
somewhat of a useful list, but like you said, there's some weird stuff on here too.
yeah.
So,
It's what I try to do on my channel too, and then we'll move on. It's what I try to do as well, like try to speak more in layman's terms, and I try to speak about like not virtue signaling or having this litmus test of like if you're not gonna if you don't say LGBTQIA plus every time, or if you don't say point out every microaggression or this and that, like we shouldn't be basing ourselves that much in something so pointless, I think. But yeah, if I don't have anything else to add on to that. So our new segment that we're ending with today, claim for claim. Swall kind of proposed this, thinking kind of like how the Jubilee videos work, where they bring the claim and then they debate it. Obviously, it's just the two of us. We don't have 20 people surrounding us. So we're just going to bring a claim. We each have three. They're supposed to be hot takes. This was kind of last second. So maybe as we go forward, we'll get hotter and hotter takes. These are going to be some pretty spicy ones still. So we'll make the claim and then we'll just discuss. We'll see if we agree. We'll see if we disagree and debate if we do, agree if we don't. Swa, it was your idea, so why don't you have the honor of
oh
giving us the
man.
first claim?
He said, "You gotta go first to make yourself look crazy." I'm gonna start with one that's not that controversial. Then,
All right, all right, all right.
uh,
Like I
I
said,
th-
well, before you go in, like I said, none of mine are that controversial. So Swa,
yeah, so I'm gonna
you
look
might be
crazy
turning you might be
anyways.
turning the fire up. Yeah.
That's wild. That's wild. I hope. Would you say that one guy I have who's a fan is? What's his name?
Tommy.
Tommy.
Yeah.
Hopefully you agree with these, dog. This one might be controversial to Tommy, though. We'll see.
All right, all right.
UBI and free unelective healthcare are borderline necessities for the country to move forward. That would be my first claim. And I think that it's for a lot of the reasons that we outlined in the crime section. And I think it goes along with one of my other points, but I think that healthcare is so huge. The fact that you can go give birth to a child, something that's a blessing and is good, and good for the country, on multiple levels, and it can end up costing you $5,000 to $10,000, is wild when we have all of the technology, all of the tax money to do this. And we're just spending it on other things. That's what it comes down to. We already spend an insane amount on healthcare as it is. And part of that is because we have this treacherous mixed system, and the mixed system is garbage. And then with the UBI, like I said, I just believe even just $1,000 and maybe 500 for every dependent, or 200 for every dependent, anything for the dependents can go a long way for a lot of small families, or not small families, but I should say lower income families and middle class families. Um, and maybe we even have it that you price out at a certain, like, 200,000 a year joint. Like both mom and dad make 100K each. Okay, probably you don't need it then. But I don't know exactly how it would be implemented. Andrew Yang, of course, talked about this, but yeah, that's my first claim. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, excuse me. So yeah, I don't disagree too much. Obviously I am a staunch supporter of universal healthcare. I think it should be single payer. I think that private healthcare shouldn't exist. I think most of what you said is completely accurate. It would give us lower medicine costs. Obviously, just anyone in the richest country in the world being unable to afford any sort of healthcare, in my opinion, is egregious.
Travesty.
Right?
It's
Yeah,
embarrassing.
it's a travesty. With UBI, like we said earlier, I agree. Kind of like I'm not too indifferent to it. I think that absent other policies that I would support more, I would be in favor of it. My argument against it is that one, I think that there's other policies that should take priority to it. I would think something like WIC for all, something like housing first type policy, some sort of public transportation, like a rail, like a high speed rail or something, things like that. And I think like for necessity, more born out of necessity, should be implemented. And I think the biggest argument I would have against it is that we need some incentive for people to work to have that base of taxation to fund these other policies that I would think are more priorities. And I think the biggest incentive for that is the consumerism that exists in America. And I think that UBI is the only policy of those that pulls from that, in which that you could put money directly in someone's pocket and they could use that for the fun things. They could use that to buy their phone, or they could use that to buy the fun things that they want. Whereas we should more so address the necessities, and then we should have people work to get the things that they're going to be more incentivized to have. That way we can add more points of taxation.
Interesting. Never seen a lefty go with the people just need to work. They're lazy. I know that's not what you said,
Really?
but
So you've
that
never okay, well, you've never talked to people really, really far left, because that's like core to communism, is like everyone has to work to fund things for everyone. And that's like I've divulged from that. I think in the perfect society would be set up in a way in which all of your necessities are paid for, but you're incentivized to work through your consumerist nature, like through our want for things like phones, the movies,
yeah,
going out to eat.
I think that people inherently want to and need to work. I don't
I
believe
agree with that
that
somewhat. Yeah.
people are just going to laze about. I don't think it's possible, to be honest with you. I think you kind of just end
Well,
up
I agree.
dying
See, I
if you
agree
do
with you.
that.
I
So
think that most people want to do something with their life, and that 90% of the time, what they'll do will line up in ways that could economically benefit society. That's the way, like, I always present it. So, like, I think that odds are most people with the opportunity would do something that would benefit society economically. I just think that in terms of what would they be more incentivized to work more for, right? Would it be the movies? Would it be, that kind of thing? Or would it be like, oh,
yeah, I would say it's a complete framework adjustment, in my opinion. Of the incentive is the work itself, and because it would be, now I'm not working because I have to make my rent payment, and I'm working out of necessity. So I'll take what, it's how people fall into. I went to school for this. My job is completely different field. That's how people fall into that, because they don't care. They just need money.
mhm,
Now people will start to do their passions. When people start to do
sure.
their passions, we won't even know. We can't even conceive of the type of careers that will exist
Sure, and
because
I
they don't
agree.
even exist yet.
I agree. My only pushback there is like ability. I do think there's something to be said about, and I don't know if this sounds harsh, but I do think there's like an IQ kind of cutoff to people who have like the capability to really like orchestrate like their own business or things like that.
Sure. And it might not
And
even be a business
and
though.
if we're talking about incentives for those people to work, like if they know like, okay, like even if I chase my passion, there's slim chance that I could do it, like maybe I will still have to end up just working at like a restaurant or something. I think they would be a lot more incentivized to do so if it means like, okay, doing that is gonna be able to pay for the newest iPhone and the cleanest fit because I'm not using any of that money for my rent or my healthcare or whatever it might be. That's just
And
but
I agree there will be people who are like that. Um, and I was curious on the WIC thing, why you don't feel that UBI covers that, as I mentioned in the earlier segment. Like,
I think it could in theory. I just think that if
or
you're
you're just making the same argument that they're just going to use it for their outfits and shit.
well, there's that, but there's also if you're just taking like the totality of people's bills, like let's say they have like childcare they're struggling with, that's already like some people are paying like 250 a week for childcare.
Right.
Like, so let's say that that's a grand a month. So then let's say your entire UBI has to go towards that. Now it's not helping you with groceries at all. Let's say that
Yeah, but you
you're
just freed up $1,000. So it
sure, but
is
well, what I'm saying,
helping
what
with
I'm
your
thinking of,
groceries.
let's say it's somebody who didn't have the ability to work because they had the child, but now they have the ability to work and like they were living on government assistance, but now they can work and provide for themselves, but they needed the child care. So they're going to be roughly in the same situation. You know, they'll have a similar financial situation, but their UBI is going to be going towards
Wait, how would
allowing
that be the
because
same?
rather than being on Section 8, now they're paying rent with their income rather than having,
Well, I guess you're saying their
food
pay would end
stamps.
up being whatever they were getting on
Like they would
Section
be a
8.
little bit better off. They would be gradually better off. But I'm saying rather than having their rent paid for, now they're paying that out of pocket. So that takes from like what they would be gaining from the job rather than having like, say, food stamps, hypothetically, they're going to be paying for that rather than having like Medicaid. Now they have to buy private insurance, like in a world where all it is UBI. You're getting what
Sure,
I'm saying?
sure.
I would say that like you could see how quickly that kind of like peels back from being able to provide groceries. Like, do you kind of get how that could be at least for some people?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
I would rather
my
something that would do it for everyone for sure.
yeah, I get it. Yours is more of a guarantee that they at least have the food, where mine is the onus is on them to decide where all of the pennies
Yeah.
go and make sure that some goes to food, but they
See,
might not do the
it's
making sure
this
because they
is
might have to put it somewhere else or feel that they have to and
this is
neglect that
the
their own food. But
this is the key difference in your right libertarian nature and my leftist nature, where you think that people should be free to decide what they want to do, and I think it should be structured in ways that guarantees outcomes from the government.
yeah, on some on this issue, yeah, I think that that's a split that we have. I don't think it's how I think sometimes I have the same view. It just
Yeah,
depends on
just
the
here,
thing.
just here.
When it
Yeah.
comes to finances, I typically am like, yeah, let me do with my money because I am financially literate. I would like to believe. So I'm like, I know I can do it better than the government will allocate my money. Whereas there are
But
people.
like I said, I'm indifferent. Like if somebody said, "Hey, the only thing we could pass is UBI, we're not going to get any of that other stuff," I'd say, "All right." But yeah, other than that, I don't have
Based.
any. Are you
Okay, your
ready
turn
for
then.
yeah, so my first one is progressives in Congress are our only hope, not conservatives at all, and not moderate liberals as well. I'm talking not the Joe Bidens of the world. I'm talking the AOCs of the world. I think progressives are the only consistent anti-war vote. They're the only consistent anti-war voices, the only consistent anti-corporate rule vote. They don't take big money to sway elections. If we're going to pull back from the inherent corruption in politics, progressives are currently the only hope that we have for that. If we're going to end the endless wars, progressives are the only vote for that right now. If we're going to shape the economy to work for everyone rather than the rich, progressives are the only vote for that right now. They're the only group in Congress for things we support, right? They're the only progressives are the only group that have 100% support behind universal health care, paid family leave, child care, higher minimum wage, these kind of worker first policies. They're the only people who would support something like UBI that you're talking about here. So I think they're clearly our only hope if we want to focus on the people going forward.
Yeah. So I'll agree on parts and disagree on others. I'll agree with some of those things that you outlined where we have agreement. They are the main people who push that. Obviously, there are Democrats who believe in those things, and I'm proof that there are some conservatives as well. But it is few and far between for sure. But
I was
I'm
talking
gonna
about
obvious,
specifically in Congress. I want to say just
yeah, fair enough too. And I'm gonna say obviously I'm gonna push back on some of the downsides of progressivism. I think that it can lead to degradation of societal standards and societal norms, which can, in the future, have roundabout negative causes on society itself. So even though we might have some of the economic problems solved, then I think we'll have social problems to solve. And obviously, I would like to fix both. Now, obviously, pick your poison, I guess, pick which one you prefer. But that would be my pushback. Would be I think that there would be
Yeah, so
negative social outcomes from
I
that.
think not only couldn't you connect that to anything that's substantiated, but I also think that if you really wanted to address that, progressives are the only way to do so because they're the only way to get money out of politics. They're the only way to give people more of a say on how to sway politics rather than having big money do it and donors. It's people who don't take money from donors. They don't listen to corporations. I think that it would allow more democracy, more people like you to have a vote, and it would allow more conversations that we're not able to have right now because you have money and you have this real partisan cult like loyalty from conservatives blocking that.
You mean conversations in Congress or in life?
I think in life, conversations that end up with policies and such enacted, change
What
enacted.
conversations don't you think we're able to have?
Well, one, I don't think we're able to talk about things like racism because I don't think a lot of people who voted for Donald Trump will just be like racism isn't real, or they just want to deny it because if they admit racism is real, they probably have to admit that Donald Trump is racist.
I don't think that's true in the slightest. I don't
That's
know
absolutely
anybody
true.
who
What
doesn't think that
okay.
racism is real.
I have multiple debates that I could send you on my
Where they
channel
don't
right
think it's
now
real
where
or where they
people
don't think it's bad.
I should say they don't think it's like they don't think it's a real problem right now, that they think it's been gone, that racism is not an issue anymore. Like they just think it's like
Oh,
a
well, then
thing that the
I'm
left just talks
closer to
about.
that. I don't think it's gone. It'll never be gone. I don't think it can ever go away. I
Yeah.
think it's inherent,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
No,
But,
see, and that's what I'm talking about. And these are conversations I don't think that can be had because of there's a lot of
well, I
money
mean, we're having the
there's
conversations.
being a lot of money, but it's not a real conversation if you're coming from a position where you don't even think it's a real problem.
That is the real conversation. That you're just saying people don't agree with me right now.
No, a
That's not the
conversation should be
same.
about how to fix the issue that objectively exists. It's like how climate change, right? Climate change is objectively a problem. We're not having a real conversation about climate change if I'm talking to you and you're saying it's fake. That's a waste of time, is what at least I like semantically, that's what I would consider it. I would consider a real
Yeah,
conversation
but okay, so
on the
race,
substance.
but we agree that racism exists, and we agree that racism's a problem. You're just saying it's a big problem, and I'm saying it's a minor problem.
Sure. I mean, it's statistically, it has a pretty big effect on people still today,
I
is what
mean,
I would say.
that's not, I guess perhaps not a right now discussion. I guess that can be one of our debates.
There we go. We had such a
Uh,
hard time for a debate this week. Now we know what to debate
Let me
next week.
hold on. I'm writing down because we never
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
remember.
right. Write it down,
uh,
and then you can go on with your second claim.
Racism, is it a big problem or
Yes,
not?
yes,
Okay.
and you can go on with your
Yeah.
second claim. So
So
your first
my
claim.
second claim is yes, the economy sucks, but it's mostly personal habits and financial literacy that people are suffering from. I think that if you look at the stats, I think it's the average American cannot afford a $1,000 emergency. Um, and again, we're saying the average American. So I'm not talking about the poor and destitute. Obviously, they can afford a $5 emergency. I'm talking about the average American who has a car and a cell phone and a television and a house and food and a job and some living relatives. I'm talking about regular ass people. So I think that we have a financial literacy epidemic. I feel like it's insane. I don't know about your schooling, but we took it personal finance in eighth grade and then just general economics in high school. That's it. That's that you could take like a home ec type of thing where they might have taught you like budgeting, maybe, but that was like an elective. I feel like it should be a whole ass math class, personal finance, or maybe like practical math, maybe we'll call it like math that we do every day in our lives that actually affects us, not quadrilaterals and negative number. None of that shit matters. None of that shit matters unless you're going to be a scientist or a mathematician or something like that. For regular people, we need to know how to budget. We need to know what credit is, how it works. We need to know about predatory lenders. We need to know about payday loans. We need to know about interest, compound interest, but also interest on like credit cards and stuff. People do not know, and then they screw up their lives either by taking out. I know people who have taken out six figures, over six figures in college debt for the dumbest degrees, for some even good degrees, but it's still they don't understand what they've done because they're 18, they're children when they sign these things. And I think that those are the bigger issues rather than, I mean, obviously the economy matters overall, but right now, unemployment's pretty low. generally speaking. And even if you want to say under Biden or under any of the Democrats, it never fluctuates like 20%. It's never that crazy. Like it's all pretty, people have jobs. So it's not that either. I think it's mostly personal and financial literacy issues.
Yeah, I am probably the complete opposite. I would say I'm like a 180. I think both
Hell
play
yeah.
I say both play a part, but I think that like financial literacy is the minimal, like it's like 90-10, and that would be like the 10, and I think the economy is like 90. It surely plays some part, especially in how people save for plan for retirement or things like that. A lot of people don't even consider those things, which is an issue. And when I was in high school, I think we took a semester of econ and we didn't even
Yeah.
have personal finance. So
Yeah.
I
So
also
that's
think that,
tragic.
yeah, I think that like there should be an entire tax class that's taught. And I think that there should
Yeah.
also be like a finance class, like as different things specifically. So I agree
Yeah.
with you there. I just don't think
Based.
it's the majority of the problem. I think that like when you see that wages have been stagnant in the same time that the cost of everything, education is up like over 100 times, price of housing is up like so much, like the in cost of living is up. I mean, inflation goes up multiple percents every year, right? So the costs are always going up. Wages haven't matched that. They haven't kept up with that any bit. I also think if you just look how the economy is structured, we've had relatively this kind of a trade policy that is structured around a trade and tax policy that is structured around shifting corporations overseas for cheaper labor or shifting shifting to importing products from corporations overseas that have cheaper labor rather than giving the good paying jobs to Americans. I think that is a way the economy is structured that disadvantages people. I also think that if you look at like how corporations are structured in terms of like the CEO typically makes like I think the studies show like it's like over 300 times what the average employee makes, and then the CEO also directly picks the board. The board is then who directs profits and the pay structure of the corporation, and they're put up by the CEO who are then, I think it's over 99% if you're, when the reelection comes up, if you're put up for reelection by a board member, you win by over 99%. So like corporations are also inherently structured in a way that benefit the top rather than the bottom. So I think there's a lot that you can point to in the economy that is structured in a way that makes it hard for mobility, right? Which is why economic mobility has been on a steep decline for decades.
Okay, so I have a couple questions. One, I never know how to set up talking about my own finances because I hate to. I never want to be like braggadocious. So I'm not like a filthy rich or anything, but I'm pretty financially secured. And so, like for somebody like me, would you attribute it to privilege? Would you attribute it to financial literacy? Because I'm able to quote unquote have mobility and get ahead in the economy um, ever since I've been in it, ever since I've been an adult working for myself. I've been the whole time. And so, would you say anomaly, or like how would you explain that if not
Sure.
clearly find some financial education problems?
I would say it's a combination of like luck, ability, opportunity, things that not everybody has. I'm about to die coughing. I gotta go.
You're good. You're good. Yeah, and then like on top of me, if you know anything about like Dave Ramsey and his whole thing, everyday millionaires, the majority, like 80% of the millionaires in this country are people who work like 60K a year, 50K a year jobs and then just worked and they're
Yeah,
millionaires.
so there's actually, and I actually wrote an article on this on my Substack. Anyone can check out that the majority of millionaires in this country, if you have to think of it like baseball, right? Where when people say like self-made millionaire, they come from like working a job, you think of it like, oh, they're starting from home base where they had nothing, right? Well, then think of like first base to where like you're born into like a middle class home, right? Second base, you're born into like six figures. Third base, you're born into like a millionaire family, right? And then the goal is to get back home. A home run means you're a millionaire. Most millionaires in this country are born on like second or third base, in which they're either born into a family that has a seven-figure net worth, or they're born on second base where they're in a family that has six figures, and then they just like inherited property or worked a job and saved up, and it just got them over that little bit of hump. That doesn't speak for the majority of Americans who were born into like literally nothing, or they're born into just like a middle class family. They maybe like inherit their mother's house, you know what I mean, when she passes away or something. Like, other than that, they're not ahead like a lot of these millionaires were.
Yeah. Okay. So I would say, I'd be interested to look at that data. With data that I have and that Ramsey have is that actually 80% of millionaires didn't inherit a dime. So nobody got any houses from anybody. Nobody did anything. They worked, they invested, they were millionaires because that's all it takes. That's literally all it takes.
Yeah.
And so that's 80% of the millionaires. Now, we're not talking about 20, 30, 40,000. We're talking about $1 million.
Yeah, that's
Um,
strongly, to my understanding, not true. And then also, I would say to the extent that somebody didn't inherit a dime, you're still ahead of other people if you're born into a family that has more wealth, because you're going to be privy to better education, you're going to be privy to more opportunity, just for sheer like transportation, things like that. There's
Well, but
things like so
but then that would aid in my point. You just
on
said
a
born into a better
sociological level.
education, which is kind of what I'm saying is, yeah, maybe their parents were a little bit more well off, probably because they practiced good money habits and then raised and taught their kids good money habits like saving, budgeting, investing, and
Well,
like I
no, and
said,
that
and
also
so that's what it takes. So
relies on a
yes,
lot of assumptions. It relies on one that the parent only has money because of smart financial assumptions, and then that they pass them on to their children rather than the kid just had a Harvard education that looks good on your resume, so now he can get a job, or dad owns this corporation and can just give him a job on the board of the corporation, or because dad is so and so, he can get a job here. Like, it just leaves out a lot of things and relies on a lot of assumptions, in my opinion.
okay, so I was looking into this 80%. So it looks like one third were below the middle class, one third were just solidly middle class, and one third were upper. So it looks like two-thirds were middle class or lower. So the stats are still most millionaires, like you and me, started with $0 in their bank account, maybe
Sure,
five
I would
thousand
have to
dollars.
see that data, and then also like you can qualify middle class as still six figures. I think middle class is up to like $130,000, and again, like, you're better off if you're born
But
in.
was that middle class in like 1960? Because most millionaires are, 60, 65-year olds. So their parents, when they were born, this was in like the 60s.
Yeah.
And so it would be middle class then that they were born into, not middle class now. So then we're talking like what, 30? Now, I don't know about inflation, what that translates
Yeah,
to,
it would
but
be money
we're talking about
as
like
compared to today.
30K.
So it would
I don't know
be,
what
we're
salary
talking,
was.
it would be comparative to today. The middle class would be the same. We would be looking on a comparative basis, right? Like, what they would be making would be adjusted with inflation the same as today. It would be the
Yeah, I'm
numbers
not sure
would be
what
the
the
same.
if it would be 100K, but anyways, that's my claim. Let's go to your second one.
My second one is being anything but vehemently anti-racist is racist, and that includes all conservatives that voted for Trump. I think that allowing evil to happen means you're complicit in it. I think that if you were friends, or like, let's say you know what Jeffrey Dahmer is doing, and you just allowed him to do it, you would be complicit in his actions. I think the same is true for racism. I think the same is especially true when you voted for Donald Trump and you allowed him into a position of power where he would then directly be overseeing millions of African Americans, knowing that he is racist. I think that every conservative who ignores this fact is in themselves racist by enabling racism.
Um, so I would agree with the first a few things you said. I would agree that if you're not against racism, I don't know if I would use the term. Well, I don't even. I don't know anybody who's not against racism, so I don't really know what that means. But if somebody was not against racism, I guess yeah, they'd just be for racism. I think so.
If
I
they're
think I would agree
comfortable
with.
with it. Yeah.
I
I
think
think
that
there's,
would.
well, there's plenty of conservatives who will be like, I'm not racist, but then they'll support Donald Trump.
Right, because they don't view him as racist.
But he is
Or
clearly racist.
or when we're talking about politicians, the whole thing is so rigged that you have to choose: do I support the person who kills babies or support the person who's racist against brown people? And so
Right.
it doesn't really matter. You can't judge people by who they
Well,
vote like that because it's
one,
not.
nobody's killing babies. So that's just,
Well,
if you're lying to yourself or you're being delusional, that doesn't matter to me. I
and
think
see,
that
you
one,
you
if you're
talk about
comfortable with
the
racism.
conversations we can't have. That's a conversation that we would say we can't have. We can't have the conversation about abortion because half the people deny what it is. And so I
Well,
would
no, a
agree.
fetus is biologically different than a baby,
Alive.
right?
Yeah, it's
Didn't didn't
biologically a human. Yeah.
didn't you say like last week, law of identity and everything has to have a name? Like, a fetus is biologically different than a baby, so then we wouldn't call it a baby, right?
No, it's not biologically different from a
Okay,
baby.
how does a fetus breathe?
I mean, what's that have to do with if it's
How does a fetus
biologically?
breathe, and then how does a baby breathe?
Depends if the baby is completely healthy or not. It could be hooked up to machines like what
No,
if
a
it's
baby that is born and out of the womb and is
yeah, it can
completely
be hooked up
healthy.
to machines to breathe just like a grown man can.
I'm
Yeah.
talking about the natural biology of a baby. So a
Sure.
healthy baby that is born, and then how does a fetus breathe? I understand you don't want to concede they're biologically different, but they are. They very clearly are.
No, I mean it doesn't matter that they're bio. I mean,
They
baby.
are. So they aren't. So
Yeah,
a
I
fetus
mean
isn't a baby.
my
A
three.
fetus isn't a baby, right? A seed isn't a
No, a
tree.
3 month
A
old
seed
is
isn't a
bio.
tree, right? A bunch of
No,
car parts isn't a car. Like they're biologically
no.
different.
A 3 month old is biologically different than a 7 month old, but they're still babies. You're just
No, no, no,
arbitrarily
no. They're
deciding where the cutoff
biologically
is.
a baby. They're still biologically babies.
Baby's not a real thing. It's just a term we made up for a specific time frame.
Right,
So
right. It's a scientific
you're
term. It's
just
a
arbitrarily,
scientific term that
you're
has a bunch of
arbitrarily
categories.
deciding it doesn't go here. But the point
No,
is,
no, it's a
back to
scientific
the
category, right?
topic,
Off
back
of
to the topic of your
biology,
second
which is a fact, right? We label
theme
biology,
here.
but biology is an objective fact. Biology exists. We
There
label
are
what it
biological
is,
differences between
and
the stages of a
there are
human being's
innate
life. Yes,
biological differences between a
but
fetus and a
that's
baby. So a
irrelevant.
fetus isn't a baby. Yeah.
Okay, they're killing fetuses, which are
Yes.
offspring of humans.
Yes.
We call offspring of
Yes.
humans babies.
Yes.
I call my
Yes.
7 year
Yes.
old my baby.
No. No.
Yes,
No, we
yes.
call a baby
I just call my 2.5 year old. I
biologically.
call my
Well, if you're
wife
talking
a baby.
colloquially, if you're talking colloquially, sure, but
Yes,
what something
yes.
colloquially is isn't what it actually is.
Okay, so one side is killing living human beings. There we go.
Sure.
No debate there. Regardless, so you can't look at it as, oh, he voted for this, therefore he supports everything this person says or does. That's retarded. Sorry, stupid. Um, but that's not something that we can allow for because otherwise we're all villains. We're all horrible
Sure,
people.
I would just say that if you
So it
think
doesn't mean you're
that if
racist
you
because you voted
think
for Trump.
that a fetus is worth more than racism against living people, persons,
Yeah, if you think
you're
living
racist, then
people's
you're racist.
lives are more important
Then you're
than living
racist.
people's feelings,
Then
then
a fetus isn't a person.
it's a live. Okay, it's a
It's also
living
not a
being,
baby. But again,
living
like it's
human,
just my
living
opinion.
human.
In my opinion, if you think that a fetus is more valuable than protecting a fetus means more to you than stopping
All
racism
human life is
against
more.
persons,
Yes.
against persons,
All human life is
then
more
you're
important
racist.
than
In my opinion, then you're racist. Yeah. It's that simple to me.
I'm
You're
racist. But
willing
all
to enable
human
racism for nothing. But what's your
for
third
human
claim?
life, yeah,
Yeah. What's your
yeah,
third
to
claim?
protect human life.
But not on end of life care, not on like in war, not in anything else, but
Oh, I'm a
specifically
pacifist.
fetuses.
I'm a
Yes, right.
pacifist. So,
Nothing else.
anyways, so my third one's really gonna. We're already heated here, but women's primary vocation should be homemaker is my most controversial, probably, in my final one. So yeah, my bold claim is that a married woman's primary vocation should be homemaker. And to clarify, that doesn't necessarily mean they can't have a job. That doesn't mean that they have to have kids either. Homemaking is more than having kids. Homemaking is a lot of different things, but it is focusing on the home, the culture of the home, focusing on fostering peace in the home, bringing feminine energy, beautifying the home. If there's kids present, raising the kids, nurturing the kids, taking care of the kids primarily. I believe that they should. Um, I, I'm trying to think of other things that would be considered homemaking. Um, Talking to neighbors. I mean, there's so many things that go into homemaking, and it looks different for everybody. Some people consider like budgeting. Some people put that more with like head of household finance stuff. But I believe that a married woman's vocation is to be a wife and to be a homemaker. And I think that there's data to support that. If there is kids, for instance, if you are separated from your kid and they're under one, it's been linked to aggression in that child's behavior when they're not with their parents or with their mother. Stay at home parents, or I should say kids of stay at home, have improved GPA. Regular family dinners, so like having a regulated schedule, having somebody at home to prep and make sure dinner's at 6 or 6:30 or whatever, has reduced depression and risky behavior in teens. Columbia University found, and then just generally, this is appeal to opinion, so don't take it as fact or anything. But 60% of Americans say that they believe that children do better if somebody is at home, and I just don't believe that children should be sent away and separated from their family majority of their childhood. So yeah.
Yeah, so half of that had nothing to do with women. It's just somebody being at home. I would disagree. I think it's pretty clearly logically untrue and possibly misogynistic. Maybe your intention isn't misogyny, but I think that the root of that is probably misogyny. Also, I just think like the stats fall apart, or the claim of like empiricism there falls apart, because same-sex families, two gay couples, two men, statistically have shown similar outcomes in behavior and education and health in terms of their children that they raise, even when they adopt at a very young age. I actually interviewed an author of multiple studies on this, and he showed this. And these were large sample sizes, high confidence intervals, like the things you would want to see in a study. So then, like that would show then right there, like if we're talking same sex couples, if we're talking like gay couples being a large, at least in, I remember, I don't remember which one, but in one of those, at least in one of those, the majority cohort were gay couples, two males. I think it just shows that one, it's just the role. I think it's more about there's certain roles of parenthood that need to be filled, and anyone can fill that. And I think that society has been structured in a way that kind of nurtures women to fill that role. But to say that there's like some innate biological reason that women should be like forced or should do this, it's like I don't know. Like if you want to say that's what you want in your house, that's fine. But then like what if the woman just doesn't want to do that? What if she's objectively worse at it than the man? Are you saying she should still be the one that does it? Like it just seems to fall apart to me at the least bit of scrutiny.
Yeah, so first off, I didn't say force, but fair. But the what
You
was the
said
one thing that you
should. So should could
should yeah yeah
imply
yeah I'm
should could
should
imply.
yeah fair. Should for me is it is my opinion that this is what you should do. I
Okay.
am judging. I am
Yeah. So
judging
no
saying
laws, no laws.
no. There shouldn't be any. That would be unhinged behavior. I would never uh not legalize. What's the word I want? Implement that into
Yeah.
law or anything. Crap. There was one point you just made at the end there that I really wanted to tackle onto. Um, Frick, what did you say?
Sorry, I don't know.
It was right before the last thing. Um, Before you said, "What if they're not good at it?" It was something right before that. You
What if
don't
they
remember
don't
what you
want
said?
to? What if they just don't want to?
I think it was literally the very
The
previous
thing
thing.
right before that, I don't know. Yeah. I said, like, what if they don't want to?
Okay,
What
I'm just
if,
gonna have to
yeah.
just make up a rebuttal. But yeah, so I think that one, like I said, I'm not saying that no other outcomes can work. So like the gay couple thing is not really an objection to what women should do. It's just saying, hey, gay people have good outcomes. That's kind of an aside because I'm
Well,
saying
it
married
shows that it
woman.
has
So
nothing to
if they
do with
choose to
women.
enter into well, I'm saying married women. So I'm not saying a woman's vocation. I'm saying a married woman's vocation. I'm sort of, you can use the word marrying again, marrying this identity of homemaker with married
Right. But see,
woman.
what you're doing is you're extrapolating it to the couple when what you should extrapolate it to is the child. Like, if that was true, then what should logically follow is that children who then don't have that role, that married mother, married woman mother, would then have these lower outcomes, right?
Sure, I should have support or brought data more on the moms uh, too. There is data out there. I just don't have it prepared, but there is data on like what it does for the woman as well. I remember one of the things I wanted to say. Hell yeah. Um, you said it could be either role. On some of this, yes, but on some of it, no, because like I said, with the nurturing and the taking care of the kid, only one of those roles when it's the baby can do what we know medically is the better option for feeding, which is breastfeeding, if it can be done. Of course, obviously there's issues sometimes with latching and uh, even milk production, but if it can be done, and so for that reason, at least in the early years, it really falls to the mother, not to either one, because and that's where the biology comes in, where they are geared towards nurturing the baby. I mean, they're supposed to not supposed to is morally loading it, but supposed to feed their child through about a year old, and so they are just more
Sure, but
naturally
like as you
supposed
said,
to
that's not
nurture their kid.
objectively true. There's plenty of women who can't. There's plenty of women who
No,
don't.
like I said, I'm fully agreeing that it doesn't always go
And
that
I would
way.
just contest the veracity that there's like some proof that being breastfed as a baby leads to better outcomes later on in the life. That doesn't track to me at all. But
Oh, it's healthier, but it's. I mean, it's not like, for instance, one of the things, most of the super fat babies are on formula, like you see, and then people were, they say they're big boned when they're like in school or whatever, and they've
sure,
just
I would
always
be
been big people. A
interested
lot
on
of those
the
are formula fed, but yeah, I don't. Again, I didn't bring that data, but that is my last hot take. What is yours?
I would be interested on the causation and the correlation behind that. My last one was my least hot take. I honestly don't know if it's even considered spicy. It's just something I really believe. I didn't know if there was any place anywhere else
Right,
to
right.
fit it.
To share
I
it.
don't think we should believe anything. We shouldn't care about anything that cannot be falsified or grounded in empiricism. I think this is something that both conservatives and religious people fall victim to. So Swal, you're the main culprit here. No, maybe not necessarily you. I do think you're a bit more pragmatic than most people I'm talking about here. But I think that conservatives and religious people often fail to do this, and this leads to dangerous outcomes both for themselves and for others. It leads to conspiracies. It leads to things like, the Earth is flat. It leads to denying science that could be very crucial down the line, like evolution. A lot of religious people deny evolution because they buy into creationism, which is an unfalsifiable conspiracy theory. And evolutionary biology is what immunology hinges on, which is where we get a lot of our vaccines, a lot of our medicines from that. So if we're going to deny that, and let's say like these people held a majority position in like our government or something, and we just saw this mass defund it because like religious people were bought into it, I just think you can see like the slippery slope this opens up to. You see it with conservatives denying an election, despite all evidence showing the otherwise. So I just think you can see why this would lead to a slippery slope. I think that the principle we should understand is that we can never prove things to be true. We just apply a truth value to things we fail to falsify.
Yeah, it's funny because if you had asked me this or brought this up like a year ago, I probably would have just wholeheartedly agreed. Um, but yeah, I was sort of the same way, and that's honestly part of why I was atheist for as long as I was, is because I was a skeptic. I didn't believe that you should believe that which you couldn't demonstrate to be the case. Um, Not prove, because proof is a math term and that's a whole different thing, but demonstrate to be the case. And so um, I would say I think that um, it is reasonable to believe things that have um, an overwhelming amount of evidence towards them. I think once you kind of reach a threshold of like, okay, this is believable, and I think that those types of things are valid to believe in, and that's for me why I converted. I had enough boxes ticked of empirical things that, okay, that's true, that's actually real, that's true, and that can push you to say,
What are those? I'm
okay,
curious what those
I
are.
can accept that. So like for instance, I mean, some of them are going to be um, more within the realm of Christendom in general. Like, I would if, for instance, God came down to earth as a man or whatever, I wouldn't have expected him to leave us with a book that I could say, this verse means that verse means this verse means that. I would expect him to have some way for us to settle that dispute, in which Catholicism has with its magisterium, for instance,
There's no
saying,
way to settle that dispute though.
I mean, it's like the Supreme
Oh, nor is
Court.
that empirical.
It's
None of
like
that is empirical.
it's empirical that they have that mechanism, and other religions and denominations don't. They just say, here's the book. Whatever you think and whatever I think is what it is, and that's equally valid. And I think that's a silly outlook. I don't understand why anybody could look at that and be like, yeah, that's from God, the greatest being of all. He came up with that idea. Let's just have a book. It seems really, really obviously dumb to me. Whereas even as our country does, we have, like the Supreme Court, where we have a way to, okay, let's say, I think that this should be this. I think this should be this. It's been ruled on by the highest court in the land. It's just in effect now.
Yeah,
You
I don't
can
know.
whine and moan on
That's a
Facebook if you
lot of
want,
like not
but
evidence. I wouldn't consider any of that empirical. It's more of like a presupposition. And it's a
what's
lot
the
that
precept?
the presup is that Jesus wouldn't have done, you said Jesus wouldn't have done something. So then the fact that it is here proves that that there's it's somehow evidence. You're presupposing the veracity of it based off your assumption that it shouldn't have been a thing.
That shouldn't have been a thing. Sorry.
You said Jesus, that you wouldn't have expected Jesus to do it. So that's you're presupposing
Oh, okay. I
on
see what
your
you're saying.
assumption that Jesus wouldn't have done that or something.
Well, I'm saying it's logically like it logically doesn't work. It's impossible. Like it does. It can't be. There's no truth there. It's impossible to ascertain truth that way.
It's
Just
all an impossibility, though. It's not logically possible for someone who exists outside of space and time to come down as a human. So
no.
like
I mean,
also like living on like you're like, okay, this part that's illogical and unprovable is fine because this part later on down the line, if I accept the unfalsifiable part, I can maybe, which that's not even falsifiable in and of itself, because then there's no way to falsify whether or not Jesus would have done that because you can't even talk to Jesus. So this is like the exact kind of thing that I'm talking about being a problem. Like there's no way to falsify that statement.
so what I'm saying is the um, idea of the other religions that this is a book that we have.
Mhm.
God gave it to us. That's it. That itself falls apart on its face to me. Whereas the claim that here's a mechanism so that when you have said document or book, that doesn't fall on its face because I see that in real life with our country, like our Supreme Court. That's a real thing. And this church has it. And so that was an empirical fact. The empirical fact is that this church has that mechanism where the rest of the stuff obviously isn't empirical fact.
Yeah.
But that is an empirical fact. If you were asking what one of the empirical things was, a data point for me that pushed me in the direction was, oh, they have a
That's not an
solution to
empirical
this
fact for
problem.
anything because that could exist in any religion, right? That's not something that
But it doesn't resist in any other religion.
other religions have churches in which they appeal to. You think that's exclusive to Catholic
Not
to
true.
Catholic faith?
I mean,
What part are you saying doesn't exist in other religions specifically?
I'm saying in other branches, if you want to use branches, if you're a Baptist or just I'm just Christian or whatever, it's just you and the Bible and me in the
You're
Bible.
just talking just Christianity though, but I'm talking like there's other religions that have these sorts of mechanisms,
Sure.
sorts of tiers.
Yeah. Sorry. That's why I said at the beginning.
So then
I'm more of talking about
why
within
yours and not
Christendom.
theirs?
Well, that's a different question.
Well,
They have
that's
other issues that are illogical within those systems.
well, that's what I
That
feel like for that claim should be the next logical step would be if that is evidence, then but why is that evidence for yours and not theirs? Would that equally be evidence for theirs then?
if
For any religion
yeah
that
yeah
is
yeah
that equally
that
evidence?
would be a point of I should take this one more seriously. I should continue looking into
So
this one if they had that as a
how many religions, and I know we're way over time, so here's
sure.
my last question. How many religions with that mechanism have you looked into?
Well, like I said, there are other reasons that I don't accept the other religions. I'm just saying
I'm just
that would
curious how
be
many of them you looked into before you said, all right, Catholic, I'm a Catholic, that's the one.
like I had. So I've looked into probably 8 different major world religions. Obviously, there's like Zoroastrianism or Zoroastro whatever Zoroastrianism,
Yeah.
and more niche things. But all the major world religions I've looked into, but I didn't decide against them on the grounds of this specific claim. I decided against them on other claims,
Mhm.
such that I knew if I was to become religious, only Christianity was one that I would be interested in
So
because other claims, for instance, like that what's his name? Mohammed blew up the moon. Well, there it is.
yeah,
So that one's out. Like
yeah.
so it's like there was other ones that had other things that were so
What
obviously
about, oh God, but then it's just like, what about all the things in the Bible that are so obviously not true?
well, that's the thing about Catholicism and is that we don't claim that any of it is to be taken. What's the
Okay,
way?
so then how do you know any of it's true?
How do I? Well, I don't know that it's true. I believe that it's
Okay,
true.
so then yeah, there you go, right there. Problem.
Well, I would argue
So
I don't know that
here-
anything is true, though. I would argue the knowledge isn't. something that we can have access to as humans. We
Sure,
can
but
only have beliefs that we really, really
I
believe in.
agree, but that's why I'm saying we should only believe in things that we failed to falsify. And then if there's no way to test if you can falsify something, then we shouldn't care about it. That's
Oh, but you can falsify Catholicism super easily, so that's a good thing.
right. You can. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree that it can be easily falsified.
So then it's cool to believe in. You said if we you should believe things that
No,
can
no,
be
no. That
falsified.
that are that we fail to falsify. That can
Yeah,
be tested.
well,
I think
there
I know
that's
what you mean to say. I think you mean to say that it can be tested. And I just think that it can be tested, and when you test it, it's false. What I would say though is what I
sure.
would do with is like so like I just want to be clear, and then I'll let you like real quick, and I'll let you get a real
Yeah,
quick
yeah, yeah.
wrap. I just think I don't like to go at religious people if they don't have like bad beliefs because I think that most people believe for good reasons. So I don't like care to get into it too much. I just think down the line, believing in things that you cannot falsify or even test to be falsified leads to dangerous outcomes. And that's why you see so many Christians who are like anti-vax and vote for Trump and think the election was stolen and stuff like that. But yeah, if you want to give your
Well, yeah, like I mean, we're not going to disagree. Like I said, if we both, I mean, I don't know if you're including Catholics or not in that because I think we, like you said, we both agree that it's falsifiable, and I would argue it is, but traditional, if you want to call it traditional, I wouldn't call it that because I'm a Catholic, but traditional Christianity or like mainstream American Christianity doesn't have that the same way because they have it as you can just reinterpret everything
yeah,
or you could just appeal to. I mean, that's why you have
that's
Westboro
what you guys can do
Baptist,
too.
but we can't because we can't contradict any of our interpretations. If we ever do, then it's over. That's the contradiction, and that's where the rules that we play by, but they don't play by
The
those rules.
Catholic Church famously said that the earth was flat and condemned Galileo.
Yeah, and on more, well, no, that's not quite what happened, but
That is what
yeah,
happened.
on it's not what happened, but um, with moral and faith
The Catholic Church did think the
promulgations,
earth was
teachings,
flat.
obviously, I
They
mean,
also
I'm
thought
sure, of
they
course, I
also
think
thought
everybody probably did for at one point. I don't really know. I mean,
didn't they also think that like
heliocentrism, or I mean,
as I
not
say, didn't they
heliocentrism.
also think the earth didn't move
The
that
what's the Earth centro called? The
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Didn't they
Gaiacentrism,
yeah,
or
didn't they think we were the center of the universe and that things like
yeah,
revolve?
yeah, yeah. But I mean, so did everybody. So I mean, that doesn't really.
But it's just like
That's not a claim that we would
so we
say
understand
is
the Catholic Church can put forth claims that are untrue.
oh
Correct?
1,000%,
So then what stops them from doing it right now?
1,000%. I mean,
Nothing.
nothing stops them from putting forth scientific claims that are bullcrap. But I don't have to believe those. I mean, that has nothing to do with being a Catholic. That's just
Okay, but
Catholics just sharing their opinion. They can do whatever they want. I mean,
all
JD
right.
Vance is wrong all the freaking time, and he's a Catholic.
Yeah. All right. Well, we are way over, so I hope
Yeah.
you guys enjoyed the new segment. We'll maybe have to a lot more time for
Yeah,
it.
you got to come up with more spicy ones. You put me out
I
here on the ringer, dude.
yeah, I didn't you got it was last second. I'm working on
See,
video.
I already had him in the chamber. I was just
Yeah.
waiting to say women belong at home.
Right. We know. No, I'm just kidding. So yeah, no, next week maybe we'll run this again, that or the debate on racism, one of the two. But when we run it again, I'll bring my spiciest ones because I have spicier takes. I got to think of some of them. So, but
Sure.
yeah, on Substack, Spotify, wherever you listen, make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, make sure you keep in tune. We're here every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're meeting on uncommon grounds, finding where we agree and disagree. And until next time, peace.
Peace.